Hello, people. I find myself contemplating the law today, and I thought, get yourself a hot cup of tea or a coffee or whatever's your preference, and have a little listen. Because it seems there's a couple of things that's happened recently in the fallout of Gus. Um, I don't know if backbiting's too strong a word, but basically Gus coming out against Carl and Carl Lentz's being portrayed as some sort of um, fraud, I suppose is the simplest way to put it. But essentially, all I want to talk about is the nature of law today. Something that comes across as being called jurisprudence, whatever the hell that means. But it's thinking about this continued search, which has been going on since the '60s in various forms of groups appearing in America, in particular, where you get these kind of fashionable uprisings of people who have certain interpretations of the law. These would be lay people interpreting legal books, and then almost coming up with a system of law that isn't legal, or even in some cases not even lawful, which is interesting. But I want to really boil it down to its bones, bare bones, and think about the judiciary. Let's start with the judiciary, the jurisprudence, and the judiciary. There's two types of laws that we're going to talk about. We're going to have like the natural law, the laws of nature, and we're also going to look at man-made laws, which would be statute laws, sometimes referred to as code laws, Napoleonic code laws, the those kind of laws that evolve with society and culture. Whereas the natural laws, laws that don't change, they're like nature. Nature doesn't change, which is sometimes referred to as the common law, the customs, the beliefs of the people. Um, so in the common law, the natural law sense of it, the idea that these laws don't change. It's quite often been said that the sun will always rise. Doesn't matter how powerful the legislature is of your particular state is. If they legislate against the sun rising tomorrow, or if they legislate against death, no one is allowed to die. It's now a criminal offence for anyone to die. You know, lo and behold, the sun will rise the next day, and people will unfortunately still die. Such is the natural course of things. So that's very much the laws of nature. And then you have the code law, which is fine tuning, or forever fine tuning what's going on. So yes, you can't kill, or yes, you can't do this, or yes, you can do that. And they'll always have they'll always be constantly updating, tweaking, revising, abolishing, um, you know, the things that are needed for that particular society. And for example, I used the recent case again with the bicycle, where someone was hit by a bicycle and the legal society didn't have an effective bit of kit, a tool in their box, a nice bit of legislation that exactly said, hitting people on a bicycle in a dangerous and reckless way is a crime that deserves such and such a punishment. It's now been amalgamated into dangerous driving in general. So whether it's a car or a bicycle, they've now obviously closed that loophole, if you like. And they don't, in the case recently of that chap who was cycling through London, they had to go back to like an 1861 or something statute in order to try and get a conviction on this guy, and the conviction was wanton and furious driving, whatever that is. So you can see the statute world has a place, has a role, but at the same time, the natural law, the law of the land, would just put it down as you've killed someone, manslaughter. It's either you've murdered someone or you've manslaughtered them, but at the end of the day, someone's been killed, and that's how simple the law can be in respect to that. Now, how does this all fit in with jurisprudence? It's quite interesting. In all the gabble that I've been having on the internet with some of the people in some of the comments in my videos, someone came up with the idea that the Bible was a fictitious book, a work of fiction. And I was trying to explain to them that the judiciary is called the judiciary because they're following the Judeo-Christian belief, the Old Testament belief in the judicial, Deuteronomy and Leviticus, I believe, are the two main sources for compensation, let's just say, of wrongdoing back in the old days, in the Jewish custom. And then obviously you've got the New Testament, which is all about forgiveness and turning the other cheek, and not seeking material wealth, among other things. But again, it all comes back a lot of the time to the Ten Commandments. The judiciary, and the Ten Commandments are pretty much. And Phil Robertson's done a great video on YouTube. Just Google Phil Robertson YouTube Ten Commandments, and there was some judge who tried to put the Ten Commandments on display in the courthouse, and he was told not to for some reason. But essentially, the Bible, as I see it, is man's way of legislating for natural laws. Now, if I bring that back to something that Einstein once said, is that there can be no equation. Something I'm paraphrasing here, but it's something in the region of there can be no equation for mankind. Essentially, we have such variety and diversity and crazy and sensible and all kinds of colours of the rainbow and behaviours and lovely quirks, I suppose you could say, that it's very difficult to put an equation down for something like that. And in some respects, it's not a law of nature. It's not as simple as gravity. It's not as simple as a waveform, or such simple processes that we see all around us, if you can call them simple. We're very much a product of nature, and now that we have consciousness in such a sophisticated way. And if you're a scientist, I suppose I'd point you to the fact that we have big brains. That's the crass way of putting it. And now we have to deal with the consequences of consciousness, which is morality, I suppose, is one thing, and the concept of wrongdoing, and whether or not you want to live in a society that corrects these things. So very much the Bible is a book about stories, and from the stories perhaps we can learn. And in many cases, it's a book about what we all can essentially agree in the in the Abrahamic religions, that we all agree that murder. I mean, does anyone there not think that murder is wrong? I mean, whether you're an atheist, whether you're a Muslim, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Hindu, Buddhist, whatever, just sit there. Is killing someone just killing someone? No context. Just is killing someone a good deed or a bad deed? Because there's creatures out there that will cannibalize their own kind. Insects, crocodiles, I think, eat their own kind. There's all kinds of animals out there that eat their own kind, and even people on Pacific Islands have been known to cannibalize people. But of course they're on an island. They're a special case, not the norm. Excuse me while I glug my tea. So, on that basis, the common law that people are trying to grasp at is almost like people trying to strive for what is natural and what is easy to understand. Okay, easy for the layman to understand, because layman is not using terms of art. They're very simple, very straightforward, down to earth. Don't steal my stuff. Don't kill anyone. Don't steal my stuff. I think that's pretty much it in the and don't break your vows. So don't be an adulteress. It's so simple. It's ridiculous how simple it is, and like it's been said, it's hard for people to get their head around. And I've done a video on the Ten Commandments, so have a little look at that. About the first 5 commandments are basically protection from evil, is what I interpreted it as. It's just like, look, stay away from idols, stay away from this, stay away from that. That kind of stuff leads down dark, scary paths. Now, for your day-to-day living, here's the other tablet, which is the 5 things, which is what you must do. Which is like, okay. And then you have all this, so that's basically man trying to become, trying to codify, which is essentially codify. You're writing it down on stone tablets, and you're trying to say, right, these things we know are bad, don't do these things. And essentially that leads into this system of codes and laws and whatever they are, legislative stuff, because it's all born from this initial belief about what is right and what is wrong. And so as society grows and gets more complicated, the legal society then kicks in, and they start legislating for everything. And this is where people get dragged into all kinds of nonsense. But is it? But is it nonsense? That's a good thing to say. Is it nonsense? Is living by a code a bad thing? Because the way that I see it is that in England in particular at the moment, or upon the land of England at the moment, is very much the common law exists exactly as it should do. But the problem is we're getting is access to it. And by access I mean is that you're always pushed down some sort of legal avenue in order to have access to justice. And invariably the legal avenue has costs associated with it. Whereas, it's even been said in the legal books is that, the people should have free access to courts of record and not of record. So regardless of what court you get dragged into, the people will always have free access to justice. So what's going wrong? Why is the legislative at this particular point in time being so, what should we say here? So harsh, maybe? So firm? So unforgiving? So determined to have control over the simpleton, the layman, with such bamboozling terms and private codes? That means that there's absolutely no chance that a private man will have the justice that he knows he should be getting. So I just find it rather interesting. I just thought, let's forget about common law, let's forget about statute, let's forget about religion and God, and just try and boil it down to what is justice at the moment. It's just a very tricky place to be. And like I said, in relation to someone calling the Bible a work of fiction, I was like, well, that sounds stupid. I'm talking about testimony. The testament is in the New Testament. The New Testament. The people have put down their. Imagine if you're Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you're writing this stuff down for future generations to understand what happened and around your time, and yet someone in 2018 has just said that's a fiction. That's a work of fiction. And on the other hand, imagine you're some guy putting comments on a YouTube channel saying the Bible's fiction, mate. Like, as a matter of fact, I thought everyone knew that. It's a work of fiction. It's just a load of nonsense. There's no proof, there's no evidence. And there's me trying to say, well, surely a testimony of someone. I mean, I obviously have no proof, no evidence that ever happened exists. This is essentially where leap of faith comes in. You have to decide for yourself. But this all comes back to where we are and what country you live in. So in the Western world, like England and America and Canada, we have a Judeo-Christian culture based on the common law. And the common law has been handed down through generations since the Saxon days. I think it was Edward the Confessor was the person who commanded that the people basically are essentially a law unto themselves. The people judge the people, regardless of what these statute and legislative and nobilities get up to in relation to, or upper class, I suppose you might say, well-to-do, high status, highbrow people. Regardless of what legislation they may create, the people should always be judged by the people. And I'm just finding myself in a position now where the whole thing has to be boiled back down to what you believe is the law. And once you've believed, and let's say you find out what you believe the law is, now how are you going to put that into action? Because if your belief doesn't coincide with the belief of the system in place that's running your justice systems, then you might as well have no justice. Because there's no way you're going to access the justice that you believe is true. Prime example of that would be in the UK. When was the last time in England or the UK they had a grand jury? They don't have grand juries anymore. So that's interesting. In America they still have grand juries. In England we don't have sheriffs anymore. Well, we do, but they're basically mothballed, but they still exist, and they have a meeting every year because the sheriffs are the people who are the law of their county. They supersede all of the people's titles. So if you're a baron, a lord, a duke, I don't know in America what you have, but whatever, a senator, whatever, the sheriff will still come in and kick your door in and get you. If you've been accused of a crime, he'll still come and get you. You know what I mean? He doesn't care. He superintends all these lovely status people who hide behind status or personas. More tea. So in England we don't have sheriffs. It all got divvied out to police force, which I can understand, because think about it in a way where when you're administrating justice, you've got a sheriff, and the sheriff has to appoint deputies for a county, and it gets silly. The amount of deputies you need for a county is ridiculous. So obviously they probably harmonised it in some particular way, and they just say, right, we'll have a constabulary, we'll have constables everywhere, and these will be like mini sheriffs working for a body known as the police force, or it was supposed to be called the police service, and then they'll go around and uphold the peace. Again, the peace. It's legislative. Police have a duty to the peace, to uphold the peace. And that's another brilliant simplistic thing, coming back to like natural law, laws of nature, and laws of simplicity. Just, it is what it is. It's like the peace of the kingdom is such a lovely term, because it covers pretty much everything. It's like the word property. Everything you own is essentially property, unless it's not your property, you're sharing it or something. And it's like the peace of the realm. All these policemen, constables, sheriffs, deputies, their sole focus is to take an oath of allegiance to either the monarch or the government or whatever it is, and then they uphold the peace of the land, which is to stop people shouting, screaming, causing a nuisance, of fray, riots, all that kind of stuff that gets defined in books and stuff. And that's all they have to do. Now, when you start getting pulled over, and then the legislator comes in and bolts on a load of nonsense for these people who have to, 1 minute they might be chasing a shoplifter down the street, and the next minute they're writing out a ticket for throwing gum on the floor. It's like, what? It's like one is one thing at law, and the other thing is another thing at legislation. It's just like, what the hell? And it's kind of unfair in a way that these people are being pulled in two directions, and sometimes they don't even know that they're operating in multiple jurisdictions or different laws. One time they're doing a law that relates to common law, the law of the land. Next minute you're writing out a ticket for chewing gum, spitting out, or whatever it might be, throwing a cigarette butt on the floor. So that's kind of it, But do you want people throwing cigarette butts on the floor? Do you want people throwing chewing gum on the floor? You see? And now everyone screams for the legislature. Oh, you got to punish people throwing chewing gum on the floor, but there's no injury, harm or loss. And if a man wants to throw chewing gum on the floor, then the man throws chewing gum on the floor. There's nothing we can do about it. Oh, but we don't like it. So then this is ultimately what builds up the legislature. So in a perfect world, in a community that is harmonious and knows what's right and wrong, without it having to be written down everywhere, plastered on notice boards all around for everyone to see, when people use their consciousness, actually think about, right, if I could throw my chewing gum on the floor and someone might step in it, or I could put it in the bin. Seems pretty crazy, that, doesn't it? I could put my cigarette out, I could flick it on the street and say, hey, there we go, or I could, stub it out and put it in the bin, or stub it out, flush it down the toilet, whatever you need to do. But it's the fact that people aren't thinking about their fellow man and the consequences of their actions is why the big fat legislator has to come down and stamp on people's guts, because people can't act in an appropriate way to their fellow man. And I was thinking about, let's take religion for an example, because we're talking about the Bible being a potential work of fiction. But let's just look at any religion, and let's look at any kind of people. So imagine a people and pick a people and pick a religion, and that religion has and that creation has no racism and has no other religion. So it's one people, one religion. Would there be, and you could even say, one people and one religion would be atheists, yeah. So there could be a whole community of atheists, for example. So any kind of belief system that someone has, so the belief in nothingness or the belief in something, whatever the belief system is, they are living together in a harmonious society. Now, would you put any money on there never ever being a murder in that place from here to the end of time? I would guarantee you there would be a murder at some point in that village or that town or that city at some point in time, because someone will get pissed off and break break character, if you like, break being a good man. And again, now we're coming back to, oh, well, we've had our first murder in Utopia. What do we do about it? Holy crap, this wasn't supposed to happen. No, it wasn't supposed to happen. Everything was supposed to be perfect. We got rid of all the gods. We got rid of all racism. Everyone's brown. Let's just say whatever. Everyone looks the same. Everyone's fine. We all have the same belief in no god. And now the unthinkable's happened, and someone's been murdered by someone else in our community. What do we do? Now you set the ball in motion all over again, haven't you? Once someone acts out of character, once someone acts against the community, then the community has to get together and decide what do we do now? So we've got Dave, he's standing here with a bloody knife and a dead body beneath him. What do we do? Oh, Dave, you shouldn't have done that. Do you punish him? Do you kill him? Do you imprison him? Do you let him go? On the basis that, that was a one-off, it's not going to happen again. It's like, what do you do? What does a society do? And that question is probably as old as the hills. And stealing shit, no different. Someone takes something. This is all about covet. This is why the Bible, the Old Testament, was it the Ten Commandments? 5 of the 10 Commandments. It's only really 5 commandments that are like day-to-day living, as far as I'm concerned. About don't covet, and covet's such a good thing. It's like lusting, greeding for, desiring other people's stuff, because that all leads to temptation, and temptation leads to sin, because you're going to do something wrong. So really, what I'm trying to say is, maybe mankind is a product of nature, but in our consciousness, we become most unnatural. The idea that anything is possible, if you put your mind to it, means, well, if anything's possible, and now you're into realms of coveting and temptation again, and therefore at some point something's going to go wrong. That is to the detriment of the whole community, regardless of common law or legislative law. But if you are on the receiving end of a crime, of a wrongdoing, then what do? You're standing there, you're looking at this utopian village again, and you've got everyone's normally gets on tickety-boo, and then you've got this one guy now who's just caught red-handed, knife in hand, blood dripping off it, and that was your sister, your brother, your mother, or whatever, and you're looking at it and thinking, hang on a minute, mate. I was going to have lunch with him in like 3 hours. What are you doing killing this person? And then, what do you do? What do you do? Particularly with violence. Violence as a crime, whether it's just a punch-up. I mean, you learn this pretty young, at school. You fight one guy, that guy gets his mates, that mate gets his mates, and then the cousins and brothers and family get involved, and then before you know it, you've got a blood feud. Someone has to say enough is enough, whether you call it chickening out, or such a thing, or someone takes the higher ground, just says, look, this has got to stop, otherwise we're all going to be dead. And that's the whole eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, which again comes back to the Bible. The Bible is not a book of science, it's a book of the behaviours of man. Yeah? This is our experiences of man, whether it's been kings and queens of past, or whether it's been the mob, the multitude, and how they behave, and how inevitable actions will happen from people's behaviours. So cause and effect in some ways. Yeah, Bible. You could say the Bible has some elements of cause and effect. So again, it's not a book of science. It's not a book of knowledge. It's just a book of behaviours, and it's the book that's been chosen in many respects. And this is in Muslim faith and in the Christian faith, and I believe I'm not an expert on any of these, and also the Jewish faith. And anyone else's they call them Abrahamic religions. These are the beliefs of those people that you shouldn't kill. But then you start getting questions, but you can kill the Gentile. What's a Gentile? Oh, it's an outsider, it's a guy who doesn't believe in our beliefs. Holy crap. So because someone doesn't believe what you believe, you can kill them, you can capitalise on them, you can pilfer them, rob them, enslave them, trick them, lie to them, cheat, steal, all those things. Oh yeah, you can do all that because they're not of our belief system. Interesting. But I never ever came across that until I think it was the Jewish society has the Gentile concept, and I think the Muslim society has something else. I don't know, is it kafir or something? I can't remember what they call it, something else. And the idea that there's us and them, where in the Christian sense, I never came across that. Is pretty much an assumption that everyone's going to be good to each other on these terms. Obviously, you had people who weren't Christian in school or white or whatever, but you just act civil. Oh, I said the word civil. But that's what I just wanted to just have a chat about some of those things, because I think it's important that people sit down and think about this jurisprudence, and it's the philosophy of what is law, where does law come from. Is all law good law? Is some law bad law? So talking of bad law, most recently the Count Dankula case in Scotland, in Ayrshire, and the fact that some guy makes a joke, a private joke, and decides to publish it to be edgy and quirky on the internet, and now suddenly someone puts in a complaint about it to the legislature, and the legislature has just the right bit of coding to prosecute that man on a criminal basis, and now Marcus Meechan, I think his name is. So now Marcus, aka Count Dankula, has to answer for his actions, and a lot of people, all these freedom of speech defenders, and all these people who think it's ridiculous, and comedians even think the guy clearly made a joke, and now is that bad law? Clearly it's bad law, but is it going to change? No. Yeah, bad law that sticks is even worse. What is good law? There we are. How do you determine what a good law is? Because quite often law, especially in the common law sense, law is always too late, because something bad has to have happened in order for the law to remedy it. So it's not a prevention like legislation tries to prevent. Law is always reactive to the wrongdoing, whereas legislation is say, oh, you have to have this, you have to have that, you have to have this, we're going to prevent all, it's going to be a perfect society, no one's ever going to get harmed again, but you're going to have a rule book the length of your arm to follow before you even wake up and brush your teeth. So it's like, it's a lifestyle choice which way you want to do it. But I can't force you to obey the simple law, and I can't force you to live your life by a rule book or before you wake up and brush your teeth. So you can't impose that either. You can't impose either belief on someone. That's what I'm trying to say. Whether it's common law or statute law, you have to basically, and that's what's happening at the moment. Is very much the statute arm of the law is being imposed very heavily upon the society. Well, on their own society, which you all have an open membership to, whether you like it or not, which is probably what I'm trying to say. Well, anyway, that's enough rambling about jurisprudence, but it's a very interesting word. What is justice to you? What is the law? Where does the law come from? Because at the moment we live in a Judeo-Christian land, and the law is very much tied to the Bible. So whether you're an atheist or not, the judiciary of this land is going to act in the way that the judiciary is going to act, which is in accordance to the Old Testament and in some respects to the New Testament. And that's like it or lump it, that's what it is until it changes. That's where we are.